조장 것 같아.
Welcome to Sex at 10. I'm Rebecca Rosenblat, certified relationship and sexuality therapist and your host, here to answer your questions on all things intimate. Whether you're stuck in a relationship dilemma, have issues with your body, trust, trauma, addiction, or orientation, or just need a little help with turning up the heat in your bedroom, give us a shout at 1-800-968-7836 and let's chat. Everything's fair game. If you've thought about it, we can talk about it. Let's begin with an important discussion on warning signs of coercive men. And to help me with that, we're being joined by an expert in the area, Debra W. Debra is a writer, a provost dissertation scholar, and a PhD candidate at York University specializing in the neuroscience of sex. She's written for Harper's Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, and The Independent, among other prestigious publications. And she's here today to discuss some critical points she made in a column that she recently wrote for the Globe and Mail. So I'm very excited to be presenting her to you tonight. Welcome to Sex at 10. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca.
It's such an important topic, so I'm glad you're such an expert in so many ways. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Debra, there was a time when the people we knew introduced us to people they knew well for matchmaking purposes. But in the world that we live in nowadays, we generally try to meet people on our own under circumstances where they can easily present only what they want us to see. Online dating, for instance. And we really don't know all that much about them or their history, which can be potentially dangerous at times, especially for women if they happen to end up with a sexually aggressive or coercive man. Something that concerns me a lot as of late because of all the stories I hear from my clients. So naturally, when I read your article, I had to have you on our show. So perhaps you could begin by telling us what led you to write that article and defining what qualifies as a sexually coercive man.
I chose to write my most recent column on this topic because I noticed when women talk about their experiences dating sexually violent men, there are almost always warning signs very early on. But women tend to ignore these signs, they dismiss them as benign. So as someone who has worked with sex offenders, I felt it was really important for me to share this information with the public. To someone like myself, these signs stand out as very clear warning signs. And I think it's really important for people to be aware of this to help prevent sexual assault. So sexual coercion can be defined by tactics that are used to obtain sex without someone's consent. So examples of this would be emotional manipulation, use of physical force, threats, intimidation, that sort of thing.
You know, one of the things that bothered me about 50 Shades was it was supposed to be mutually consensual, but she was practically being emotionally blackmailed, you know, given this amazing life and she's excited, and then she doesn't want to participate and she hears, well, this is who I am, so if you want to be part of my life. And so that's kind of setting the stage for something that a person may not be interested in, but they kind of feel they have no choice because they put the two things together and they think if I want one, I have to participate in the other.
And the other thing with the BDSM community, they very much revolve around consent.
Absolutely.
So before there are any playing together, that's the term that they use for having a sexual encounter, there's a lot of negotiation, there's a lot of emphasis on boundaries and safe words. So I don't know that that was necessarily you know,
it wasn't handled very well, and I think the BDSM community was also concerned about that because it is about safe words, it's about contracts, it's about check-in signals, it's about sobriety, so we know when where we're headed. And because people do, when they're in scene space, sometimes people kind of go into a trance-like state, so sobriety is important, but none of that was covered. So I'm really glad that you're going to be talking about what sorts of things we should pay attention to. It is said that even a serial killer within the first date or within the first couple of hours will drop enough hints to know that they're not safe, but we're just so hell-bent upon wanting to like this person that we make little excuses and we don't pay any attention to that.
Exactly.
Viewers, if you fear that you might be dating someone who has boundary issues, please call us to talk about your concerns and to get some great expert advice. Now, what does the scientific literature have to say about sexually coercive men?
So men who commit rape typically present one of three different presentations. So the first one is sadism. So these are men who are sexually aroused by seeing their partner either humiliated or suffering. The second presentation is something called a coercive paraphilia. So paraphilia is an atypical sexual interest, and it is someone's primary sexual interest. So it's also immutable. It's something that's going to be around for their whole life. That's how they enjoy sex. It's not something that can change. So for men with a coercive paraphilia, paraphilia, they actually prefer rape to consensual sex. So about
and that's the only way they get off.
That's the only way they enjoy sex, exactly. So about 60% of convicted rapists show this preference. And the last presentation is antisociality. So people who have, who are indifferent to the well-being of others. They can be very charming, these men. They're very good at lying as well.
Like sociopaths, they can be some of the most charming people, and they can be quite successful.
Yes.
Because emotions just don't play into it. They really don't care.
Exactly. The people are seen as objects to them.
Absolutely, to advance their needs, their pleasure, and whatever else that they want. It's all about them always. Viewers, if you have questions or comments on the subject matter, or you'd like any help with relationship or sexuality issues in general, please call us right away. Let's get down to some brass tacks. What are the warning signs we should be on the lookout for when it comes to such men? And you talked about that they're there and lots of people ignore them. What are some of these signs?
I would say the most important thing, or the most glaring sign, is when someone doesn't respect your boundaries, if they're pushy. So even before having any sort of intimacy with that person, you can usually pick up on someone who tends to put their own needs first, as well if they seem to revel in taking advantage of people, people in their lives, their colleagues. And with coercive paraphilia, something that really stands out is these men, so cues that would typically turn off most men, so signs that a partner is resisting sex or abhorring sex, usually is a turnoff for men. But for men with coercive paraphilia, this is something they actually find more arousing.
That does it for them. That's what they're hoping for.
Yes, exactly.
So really important that people are sort of on the lookout for boundary violations in general. And sometimes some of the women that I've spoken with, they'll say that, even on a date, the guy who's just talking about himself, he's not even interested in talking about you, very self-centered, hasn't asked you much about you, it's been all about them. That can be a sort of an emotional signal to a possible boundary violation, because they're not interested in you, they're just interested in how they appear to you.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's a subtler. Any other points that you can think of, kinds of things that women generally tend to ignore?
I would say women in general tend to overlook their own gut instinct. So we're socialized to be nice. We're told to put other people's needs before our own. So in a situation where a woman feels uncomfortable, she'll often doubt herself, especially if her partner seems to be acting like nothing is wrong. So I say it's really important for women, if you feel that way, to always follow your instinct. You feel that way for a reason, and your safety is the most important thing. Yeah, so to remove yourself.
And one of the things that I also point out often is that what somebody does to someone else, they're perfectly capable of doing to you. So if they're violating, say, the waitress's boundaries, and they're just, you can tell, it's pretty obvious, then if they can be that way, or they can be condescending or misogynistic, then you know that they can feel that way about you as well.
Exactly.
There's nothing stopping them. And I think we try to feel, no, I'm different, I can handle it, and this person is on a date with me, they want to be on a date with me, so they won't be like that. So we tell ourselves little lies, and we ignore that gut instinct.
And like you're saying, in the early stages too, you're very excited about someone. I tell people as well, if a man says he likes something sexually, he probably really likes it, and probably always will. So that's something you need to realize and accept. If you're going to be with this person, it's not something that's going to change. I think in the early stages, it's easy to think you're going to be able to overlook something, or hope that once this man gets to know you better or falls in love with you, that's going to change his behavior.
Whereas when it comes to particularly fetishistic stuff, I mean, it could have been hardwired between 5 to 8 years of age, and this is part of who they are. And it's like a favorite flavor. If you tell them this can't be a favorite flavor, they may stop indulging the favorite flavor momentarily and resent you for it, but they can't change it.
Right, exactly. I think it's really important when people first start dating. Of the men that I speak with who come in and do my research study, a lot of them don't discuss their sexual interests in the early stages of dating. So I think for someone, whether you're vanilla or you're kinky, it's really important to disclose it with your partner, so that you can have an open conversation and know where you're both coming from.
I think that's really important, and particularly earlier on, so people are aware. I know some guys who very early on were quite honest. They're really honest about, these are some of the things that I'm into, this is what I like, this is what does it for me. And the women were really turned off by that brutal honesty. They were really upset by it, that how could you get into this sexually intense kink conversation? Shouldn't you get to know me a little bit better? But in fact, I think being forthright at get-go is really important, because you can't change someone's sexual proclivities.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree with that.
Viewers, if you're in a relationship that doesn't respect your personal or sexual boundaries, or if you've ever been at the receiving end of sexual aggression, tonight's a great night to call in and speak with us. Now, how can women use this information to protect themselves?
I think it's really important to keep your eyes open. As I was saying, in the early stages, it's easy to kind of be swept up in things and be excited about someone and to hope that they'll either change or that you'll be able to overlook if you see something that you don't like. As well, if your friends are dating men who seem to also have signs that are a bit concerning, to say to your friends, that maybe this is not the best idea. It's not such a good idea to be dating this guy. Having
a buddy system and kind of looking out for each other.
Yes.
And I think nowadays in particular, because a lot of people are meeting online and they I'm not talking about people that are just going on dating lines to meet someone, but people are chatting online and the conversations can get pretty sexual, something that wouldn't happen in a face-to-face meeting.
Right.
But the conversations get very sexual very quickly. So we can learn a lot about a person because they will share some of those proclivities. Do you have any comment on that?
I would say definitely it's the same sort of thing. I mean, I think when you're first becoming sexually active with someone as well, so the same sort of idea when you're having these conversations. Like you said, it's actually a pretty good way, I think, of having a sense of what someone's like before you're actually there.
Before you're actually there. What about guys who send pictures of their junk? Is that, I mean, it's a boundary violation of sorts, because if you were in a, let's say in the traditional bar situation, the meat market, I mean, people don't whip out their stuff and ask you what you think of it. So that seems like somewhat of an aggressive gesture. Would you consider that to be a boundary violation if somebody does that? Is that person who's likelier to disrespect other boundaries? I
would say it's someone who sends you a picture like that. If you say very clearly, I do not like those pictures, don't send them to me, and they continue to send them, that's definitely a sign of something that's concerning. But I think for some men who send these pictures, they genuinely think that women want to see them. And I'm sure there are some women out there who respond positively to them. So that could be part of it as well. I think it's important to really understand what the intention is. If someone is sending you these pictures and they know that you don't want to see them, then they're coming at it from a different place.
And it's true, because lots of guys, they would love to see that picture, in the other direction. Straight guys from the female, they would love to see pictures of their genitals. And so they think that it would be the same thing. It's I'd heard an interesting story where this couple, they were sort of saving themselves for marriage, and they didn't quite know how to cross that line because they had waited so long for it. So he just came out naked and was like, ta-da! And he thought, because if that's what she did, it would be great for him, and it kind of frightened her. So I guess it's along the same lines. Viewers, if you have any questions or concerns which either tie into the topic at hand or sexuality in general, please don't hesitate to call in right away. It's a great way to get expert advice. I'd like to talk about, we're talking about sexually coercive men, but I'd also like to talk about sexually coercive women. I have male clients who've had some sexually traumatic experiences, but are really afraid to discuss them because people don't respect boundaries being crossed in the other direction. So can you please comment on that, and if there are things that men need to be aware of as well?
So sexual violence can definitely happen to men as well. I find when it's a female perpetrator, for some reason our society unfortunately doesn't take it as seriously. I do think that resources and support need to be available to men as well.
It's just as traumatic to them, and they can't even talk to their friends because they think, oh, you lucky guy. And they are just as traumatized as a female who didn't want that kind of attention. And we need more resources for them for sure. Is there anything they should be looking out for? I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but in a lot of cases, for instance, if someone is a borderline personality disorder, and I don't want to imply certainly that all of them are like that, because they cross lines, they cross boundaries, and there's that very strong sense of I'm going to have you. Is there something there that guys can be kind of on the lookout for?
I would agree with that, definitely, and I would say it's very similar to the signs that I mentioned in terms of sexually coercive men. Like you're saying, lack of respect for boundaries, pushiness. If someone seems to enjoy taking advantage of other people, if they have a disregard for other people's needs, Yeah, very similar.
Telltale signs. I have so much more to talk to you. Can you stick around for the next segment? Because I have so much more I want to ask you.
I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So we're going to get into some more nitty-gritty stuff. We'll be right back. Keep your calls coming, and let's discuss sex, relationships, romance, or whatever else rocks your boat. And keep it locked in Rogers TV, because we have lots more great stuff still ahead, including your calls. So pick up that phone and call so we can connect.